Uh, anyone? Okay, it's Kyle. Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Okay, welcome Okay, I'm here now. Welcome everybody to our last industry guest talk. Today we have a very special guest called Balda, amazing director of Lorax, one of my most favorite animation, and Minions and many more. But the more amazing is Carl's journey into the industry. He has been in New Zealand, which is amazing for us. So you have been here, you have worked here. Carl was supposed to be here in person, but something happened, so he couldn't come. But next time we'll host you in person, and that would be even more fascinating. But that doesn't mean that we can enjoy your talk and look at your journey and have a glimpse of what you've done through the industry, and also any notes and inspirations for new generations of animation and visual effects and game design artists. So without any further ado, hello guys, like there's more people just trying. If you guys want to be within a frame, just sit in the front here.
Yeah.
So everyone's scattered around, so the camera cannot fit all of it. But like, hopefully, if the question comes, I possibly, let me just loosen this up so I can rotate the camera around.
Okay.
Okay. A bit of cinematography on a webcam, so that would be all right. Okay, so it's all yours.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm really sorry that I can't be there today. I love New Zealand and certainly looking forward to getting back there. It's been really far too long. I prepared some things here to talk about, and this is my first time using this platform, Teams. So hopefully it'll all go smoothly with sharing screens and I won't be clumsy. But let me give it a go right now. And let me see. I just want to share one.
The one on top right next to the red one, and you just like choose one of your screens or. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, sorry, it's asking me to change my privacy settings here to let this happen. I should have done this before. Sorry, everybody. Just bear with me 1 minute.
All good, all good.
Okay, this looks like it should work now. Are you seeing that?
Yep. Nice.
Okay, very good. So this is a quote I read recently, which has kind of become like a personal mantra for me in a way. It's from Boyd Barty's book, The Line Tracker's Guide to Life. I don't know where we're going, but I know exactly how to get there, which really resonated with me because the career trajectory that I had happened quite organically, mostly just through following, like the things that I was the most curious about at any given time. And so to kind of keep this as sort of the overall theme with what we're going to talk about, I wanted to go all the way back just to even like what got me into animation in the early days. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. This is Tucson, as you can see. It's a desert. There wasn't a whole lot of stuff happening in terms of film there, especially in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up. Most of the films that were being made, if any, in Arizona were Westerns. Old Tucson was a sound stage, outdoor sound stage, where they would shoot a lot of things like High Noon and El Dorado and this type of stuff. And while I've come to appreciate Westerns, at the time, my love as a kid were more from films like Jaws and Star Wars and the Disney films. I used to spend a lot of my time, after going to see a film like 101 Dalmatians, there was a re-release in the theaters, and this is in 1979, so there weren't like VHS machines or DVD players or anything like that. So when I got home and I wanted to kind of relive in the movie, I would just draw comic books of it and try to draw what I had seen, and that would be my way to kind of go back and watch the movie over in my head. I was also a huge Star Wars fan. That was my favorite shirt when I was a kid, that I pretty much wore out to being completely washed out.
Very cute.
And I played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. Just like hanging out with my friends, doing like a lot of like mutual storytelling through playing, tabletop games like this. Also hugely into video games, and two video games in particular. Dragon's Lair was a Don Bluth Laserdisc game that came out in the 80s, and it was the first, at least in North America, the first animated video game. So it was sort of, bringing together two things that I loved the most and putting them in one place. And then another game called Cliffhanger, which is actually based off of Miyazaki's first film, The Castle di Cagliostro. I had no idea who Miyazaki was when I was 11 years old playing this game, but this game was awesome. And then when I knew that found out it was a movie later, just blew my mind that they had like taken all these action scenes and made it into a video game. For my own work, this sort of just culminated into like making comic strips and illustrations. I worked on the high school newspaper as an art editor, and I had a comic strip that I had to come out with once a month. But I was really appreciating animation, especially when I saw the Luxo short film in a short film festival of animation at the local university. I was still in high school at the time, but it just blew my mind to see what Pixar was doing with computer animation and this new way of storytelling. But for my part, the concept of becoming an animator was really disconnected, because it just seemed like something magical that was happening somewhere out there, and I didn't know how people got into it or were doing it. I later found out that there were only a few animation schools in North America at the time, and it was because of finding this out. It was because of this man named Dan Jupe, who was a very big influence on me when I was about 18. One of my cousins said, there's a friend of the family who's a Disney animator. And Dan he just finished working on Little Mermaid. He did a lot of the Sebastian the Crab shots, and just a very generous person who got on the call with me and talked me through like what it means to be an animator, what you need to do. He looked at my sketchbooks. I sent them in the post to him, and he drew over them, showing me, basically saying like the way you're drawing is very much like an illustrator. The way that an animator draws is, they're drawing the life. They're not drawing the textures and the lights and the rendering and that sort of thing. But if you really want to learn how to do animation, then you got to go to school. And CalArts was the main school in the United States. There was also Sheridan and Ringling, I think, at the time, but not really much else. So I moved out to California. I missed the window to get in for the first year, so I just kind of lived near the school, and occasionally I would like wander onto campus and sit in the back of the class and listen to the teachers and the assignments that they were giving, and I built my portfolio out of this. That's me when I first got into CalArts. And the
hair.
Yeah,
you got such a cool hair back then. Yeah.
I enjoyed it while I could, but the sort of the assignment that we had to get our first year of school was to do a 1 minute long animation film with no sound, all pantomime, try to get the story across. And this was a challenge for me and for everybody, in fact, because we never did this before. We were just out of high school for the most part. Suddenly we have to come up and be creative and make a film. Never did that before. And so this is something that maybe some of you can relate to if you've been in the same situation, where a lot of us were just kind of waiting for this like perfect idea to just like come down from the sky and inspire us, and then you just like you're taking dictation and just start working. But that never really happens. You can wait a very long time for the right idea to come. And the thing I loved about this comic strip that I found by Dakota Cates is that this poor guy never wrote anything down. He never drew anything. He never tried anything. And that's really what can happen. This other thing I found on Instagram that I thought was really inspiring is this idea of done is better than perfect. The thing here is, like, you have to get going. You have to get started. You have to do something. And know that it's not going to be the last thing you ever do. It's a lot of the times, even when we're working the first year or so of the films that we're making, like the feature films that I've worked on, the first year or so, a lot of it can just be scaffolding. You're building things up, you're trying things out, you're tearing things down, trying again, making it better and better, and then the film goes out. Film is never really finished. It's just kind of taken away from you. It's like the time is up. I think you'll always feel this way. It never gets to be perfect, so better to get started. I spent a year working on a hand-drawn animated film, and the second year I worked on some computer animated films, which I'll tell you about. But I did 2 internships while I was at school. After the first year, I interned at LucasArts, and they were making a video game at the time called Day of the Tentacle, which was made on these old Amiga computers on a software called dPaint Animator. So it was computer 2D animation, like painting with pixels, one cell at a time, one frame at a time. This game was tons of fun to work on, really great team of people. And fortunately, it helped me pay for my second year of school. After that internship, I went back to school, and there was a bit of mystique around these new computers that had been donated to the school. So The Abyss and Terminator 2 had just come out in theaters, and ILM was getting ready to do a very big film project. So they donated to our school some of the old computers they were using. And I spent probably about 3 or 4 months working on a personal project, a student film on those computers. But unfortunately, learning 3D at the time, because there wasn't really like a program or like a methodology, it was quite new. So I spent most of my time just applying textures on surfaces and learning how to do Unix coding, which is nothing to do with animation. And when I applied for an internship at Pacific Data Images, PDI, in the lower left-hand corner there, they told me, we want you to know for sure that the reason we chose you for the internship has nothing to do with your computer animation, which is really horrible, but rather your first year film, your hand-drawn film, which really shows that you grasp some of the ideas about storytelling and animation. So PDI, some of you may know, became DreamWorks. They were bought and folded into DreamWorks, and Ants was the first film that PDI had made under the DreamWorks banner. The internship was great. I had a ton of really fantastic mentors there. Unfortunately, there was no work at the end of that summer. And personally, I was facing, going to another year of CalArts, which was, to be honest, it was quite expensive tuition. Or, maybe I could continue to develop my career working. And that summer was the summer that Jurassic Park came out. And this just changed the entire industry. It really developed computer animation and made it, proved to the world that it was a very viable way to tell stories and make films. So at the end of my internship at PDI, I went directly to working at Industrial Light and Magic. And the first 2 films that I worked on there were The Flintstones and The Mask. So this work was interesting because I was really a big fan of Ray Harryhausen. You may be familiar with like the old Clash of the Titan movies, or even like King Kong and things like that, the stop motion animator, where you're like bringing in visual effects into a live action setting. And of course, this is Star Wars, which I was such a huge fan of as a kid. So walking through these halls and being a part of such a huge legacy of like special effects filmmaking came with a bit of imposter syndrome, always feeling like, what am I doing here? How come they picked me? and especially like working on the Flintstones, there was a period where I was working on one shot. It was a shot of Dino jumping out of the house and then through the window, and then he jumps into the car and then they drive off. And really just like physicality shot, dinosaur walking, not a lot of acting, just kind of bouncy, fun dinosaur. And it was taking me weeks, and I was just absolutely sure that every day I was going into work like, this is it. They're gonna can me. They're fed up. I'm taking too long. But again, with the help of like really good mentors, my animation supervisor at the time, his name was James Strauss, and at one point he sat down with me and he kind of showed me how to like attack the shot, and he went probably in about an hour, got to the point that it took me a couple of weeks to get to. So it was really quite humbling, but extremely valuable in terms of, you know, doing my next shot much faster and then one after that much faster and getting better at it. At this point, I was 22, and Jumanji came to the studio, the original Jumanji. And the significant thing here was that ILM was bringing in so many films now, so many people, producers were convinced after Jurassic Park that, you know, they could tell their stories this way, and you know, the director is having a vision and a point of view about how to do this. That, you know, the same time I was working on Jumanji, we were doing Dragonheart and Casper and these other films. So I was made into an animation supervisor at this stage, and that just gives you an idea about how quickly people were moving up and new people were coming in. And you know, even at 22 at this point, I had seniority in the company enough to become an animation supervisor. For my part, it was really a trial by fire, learning as we go, because you know, I had up until then just been practicing trying to work with the creatures on the screen, and working and, you know, giving creative feedback to the other animators was a totally new game.
It's wonderful that you're going through my childhood frame by frame. You know, the Mask was like a great inspiration for me and for my son. By the way, he loved it when he was a little kid, and once he looked at it, and yeah, he's a grown-up man, but you know, and like Jumanji was for me like, wow, like how could it be possible? Like that was like a amazing stuff you're going through. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's great. That's awesome to hear. It's I mean, in a lot of ways, I was very much a kid myself when this was happening. You know, so trying to assimilate it all, like, and you know, being such a fan myself and being able to work on this stuff, that was a huge privilege. But it continues to always be great to hear, you know, people who resonated with this material when they saw it when they were younger. The last film I worked on at ILM was Mars Attacks, Tim Burton's film. I did all these scenes with Sarah Jessica Parker's head attached to the little dog. So the dog was CG, and part of the trick was trying to making like a realistic dog movement, but also marrying it to the actions that Sarah Jessica Parker had done with her head, and trying to put those things together. So always with the ILM stuff, there was a combination of you know, making very realistic movements, very concrete physicality, things like that, creature animation for the most part, with a technical aspect to it. While I was working on these films, Ken Ralston, who was one of my effects supervisors on Jumanji, he knew that I had sort of like this kind of wanderlust. In between the films, I had done some traveling around Europe, backpacked and stuff like that. And I've always like just been crazy about discovering new places. And that's when he told me about the Frighteners. And he said that, you know, Universal's sending a bunch of artists down to Weta and to work on Peter Jackson's film. Very aggressive production schedule. So you know what you're getting into. It's going to be like 70-hour weeks, which this is probably the most aggressive production schedule I'd ever had. But we all knew what we were getting into, and it was a bunch of locals in Wellington, and then people from Australia, from Europe, from the United States, extremely international crowd. I can't tell you too much about the history of Weta before this happened, but this, from what I understand, was like the beginnings of like their very kind of international vibe that you have at that studio. And Peter Jackson was just like an incredible person to work with, because he himself was a very humble artist. And, you know, oftentimes in working on some of the other projects that I had up until then, you know, you'll get your feedback and your notes from the director or the VFX supervisor, and they're being very professional, but there's a little bit of a distance. And in comparison to what Peter Jackson would do, which he would be in the room with you, he'd be acting out the shots. There was a shot where the Grim Reaper was getting shot up with a machine gun, and he threw himself all over the room and threw himself against the bookshelf, and books were falling down on top of him, and he was like out of breath and said, like, you know, something like that. You think you can do that? And it was just such a refreshing relationship, because he was really playing. And that was influential on me, because when I animated the Grim Reaper shots that I did, it was the first time I started getting so comfortable with computer animation methodology, how to do it. The rigs were actually quite good and very fluid, really quick updates, which, if you can imagine back in the 90s with the kinds of machines we had, you know, we would do, you could never watch, like hit play and watch your animation in real time. You'd have to render it, go get a coffee, come back and look at it and do it again. But this was the first time we started seeing that kind of thing. So it was not unlike playing with action figures. And, you know, you pick up an action figure as a kid, you start playing with it. You never, to go back to that idea about I'm not going to leave until I have a good idea, you wouldn't sit with your action figures and wait for the idea to come and then play. You would just start playing, and the story and the characters would just, you know, evolve in real time with you. So I was having this like experience in a way where the Grim Reaper was like telling me what it wanted to do and how it wanted to move, and you know, engaging in that sense of play once again as a kid, which was really just a lot of fun. So really starting to get over that imposter syndrome and start to feel like, okay, I'm comfortable doing this. When I came back to America, Pixar had released Toy Story, and now Pixar was having its own sort of Jurassic Park moment where, you know, they can do all these like fully animated computer animation films. And when I joined them, originally it was to work on Toy Story 2, which was going to be a direct to video. It was going to go right to DVD. And we were working on that for a while. But then A Bug's Life started to get towards, you know, the end, that crunch mode where, you know, the production needs to bring on as many people as they can to kind of help get it done. And I came on, I did a lot of the Francis shots in the infirmary, and a few other shots here and there, but worked on A Bug's Life for about 6 months. Returned to Toy Story 2 as one of 2 animation directors, sort of helping with the supervision and helping the animators, you know, get what they're trying to do across, work to try to interpret what the director wants to the animator, as well as doing a lot of shots myself. And as we were wrapping up Toy Story 2, then I jumped on to Monsters, Inc. already sort of in progress, and ended up doing a lot of the Randall shots and some Mike and Sully shots. And this was really a very different experience than visual effects, than Weta and ILM, because now I'm working with characters who are driving the story. I'm not working with like an elephant that's crushing the car, because the elephant, while it's crushing the car in Jumanji, it's not thinking about anything. It's not having any change of emotion. It's not anywhere in its particular arc about where, it's not about that elephant. But this story is about Mike and Sully. So, or that story is about Woody and Buzz. So when you're working on one of those shots, you have to think about, well, where are they in their story? Where are they in their arc? Where are they going? What do they feel? And so now you're really getting more into the acting side of things. And that's quite a different game, you know, than the physicality of all of it. During this time at Pixar, I met this woman, Jerrica Cleland Hura, who she was the head of layout on Toy Story 2. And I didn't, like a lot of animators, didn't really know what the layout department did. at that time, because I knew that layout was the department that worked on things before the shots came to animation. So like a lot of animators, didn't know that it's much more than like them creating the shot file for you and getting all the assets together. That's about like a fraction of what layout does. Layout is cinematography, it's staging, it's visual storytelling. And I learned this because Pixar really encouraged like in-house master classes and fireside chats so that people in different departments would share what they know. And she did a 14-week every Wednesday lunchtime masterclass. We would do exercises and we would watch film clips and she would talk about them and we would break them down. And she really like opened my eyes to what visual storytelling is all about, like how it matters where you put the camera, screen direction, all these like classic film school things that don't come across as much in my experience as in animation school, where you're spending so much time just learning the craft of performance and the principles of animation. So that really heavily influenced me. And after Monsters, Inc., my sort of curiosity and desire to travel got the better of me, and I decided to go live in Europe for a year to see how things would go. And I ended up staying there for about 20 years. So when I first got there, I went to Annecy to the film festival. It was at the film festival that I met Pierre Caffan, who would become my longtime friend and directing partner on a lot of films before and during Illumination. I traveled all over for the first maybe 5 or 6 years that I was living in Europe. Did a lot of traveling in Asia as well, teaching at various schools, sometimes for a day, sometimes for a month. And just sort of what I started to do was I started to bring in a lot of the things that I knew as an animator. And I would say, like, in your careers, if you ever have the opportunity to teach, it's the most wonderful way to actually get better at knowing what you know. When you have to explain it over and over again, and try to find ways to explain the things that you've learned and the techniques and that sort of thing. It really grounds, I think, your knowledge in it. And when you come back to do it again, I always found that I'd even gotten better through the process of teaching. But one thing I was really interested in teaching was all the stuff that Jerica had taught me about visual storytelling, and I started to even read more and study on my own films in terms of this side of things, just because I just got kind of hooked on it. And I was getting ready to leave Paris. I'd been there for about maybe 6-7 years at that time, 6 years. And was thinking, okay, maybe I'll go back to the States and, get back to Pixar or something like that. And that's when Chris Meledandri, this gentleman here, he showed up to Paris and he had a film, Despicable Me, that he wanted to make. But he didn't have like a studio set up in Hollywood or LA. Whereas the studio I was working at with Pierre, right there, in Paris, we were doing lots of short form stuff, commercials, things like this. Huge talent pool, mostly of students coming from Les Gobelins in Paris, but not like a lot of like really big film projects. So it was like really a good marriage of the two. Chris Renaud came from Blue Sky as the directing partner with Pierre on Despicable Me. So he had worked with Chris Meledandri on the Ice Age movies, and that's where Chris Meledandri had been coming from. So Despicable Me came around, and it was more obvious to invite me to be like an animation supervisor on this project, given my background. But for me, the growing edge and the thing I was really interested in doing was layout, and that's not like a typical sort of career trajectory. You don't have a lot of animators wanting to go from animation to layout, in the same way that you don't have a lot of like actors in live action films wanting to become cinematographers. It can happen, but it's just not the typical way to go. But for me, I was thinking of it as like a learning experience. I wanted to practice all this stuff that I had been like, studying and teaching and, doing on my own. and do it like in a professional environment. And we had a very small team, about 5 or 6 people total in layout. And that was another part of the appeal, is that you think about an entire feature-length film passing through the hands of only 5 or 6 people. You're going to have a pretty big influence on what makes it to the screen. Between the half dozen of us, we were placing the camera and the staging and designing the visual storytelling of the entire movie. So, they took a chance on me as the head of layout for this, having a proven track record on this. And fortunately, it all worked out. And Chris had asked me if I wanted to come back to LA for about 6 months and direct the marketing material on Despicable Me. So probably the bigger projects in this 6 months were these short films that were happening, that went on the DVDs for the movie. But I also did a lot of commercials and interstitials and like identification bumpers, lower thirds, you name it, lots of stuff ranging from 5 seconds long to 3 minutes long. But this was another big transition for me, another big milestone. And I really found myself back in this position once again, because the first day that I got to Los Angeles, one of the other executive producers came in my office and said, hey, now that you're here, it's great. Welcome to LA. We want to do a Christmas short with the Minions, kind of holiday themed. So, can you come up with a few ideas to pitch for a Christmas short with the Minions? And I was like, oh, okay, great. When do you want me to do this by? And it's like, yeah, maybe by like 5 o'clock. So I was expecting to have days or weeks or, but now I'm starting to sweat, and 5 o'clock, it's already like 11 o'clock in the morning. Okay, maybe if I skip, I don't know, how am I going to do this? So it was just out of the sheer pressure of having to have something to say in a meeting at 5 o'clock, where I'm pitching to the producers these ideas for short films. So I just got on my computer and started typing and started to kind of play with the Minions. What would the Minions do at Christmas? Where would they go? How would Gru be involved? Maybe Gru is like a grumpy Santa Claus. I don't know, just trying to do whatever I could to try to bring these elements together. And for the first, hour and a half, 2 hours, everything that I was doing just seemed like the stupidest idea. And, thinking again, like, what am I doing here? They're going to fire me, all those same things coming up again. But very slowly, a couple of things started to happen. And it was only through the process of doing something that I started to get through the bad ideas and started to find some ideas that resonated with me more. And by the time 5 o'clock came around, I actually felt a little bit excited to share what I had done to see if, it connected with the producers. And that's when the producer came in and said, like, oh, we've decided, we just had another meeting. We're not going to do a holiday short. So forget about that one, and we'll talk tomorrow about what else we're going to do. And so I never got to like pitch those ideas or show them anything, but it made such a big difference for my process moving forward, and a very important first day on this new job. At the end of all that, at the end of having done the marketing stuff, I returned to Paris because Chris had asked me to be the co-director the Lorax with Chris Renaud, who is the director of this. And I was coming in a little bit late. Production had already started. So I was just helping, as a like second point of view and support director to Chris, seeing through to the end of the project. When that had wrapped up, then Pierre and I joined up again. And we both directed together the Minions, the first Minions film, which was truly my first experience, I think, as a feature director from start to finish, taking it from early storyboards all the way to the completed until the end. And we did it all again on Despicable Me 3 right after. In fact, it was about 6 months at the end of Minions where we were wrapping up Minions, and I was starting pre-production on Despicable Me 3. So these things sort of go one after the other very rapidly. And then my most recent film is Minions Rise of Gru, which came out last year. We had actually finished it just as the pandemic was starting, but we kept it in the studio before bringing it out to the world, waiting for the movie theaters to open up. And again, another amazing experience. Every one of these films just was like, learning another way to tell stories and another important value in telling the stories. And that brings us up basically to the present moment in terms of like the main touchstones. So what I'm very keen to do is close this window and hear from you guys. And I certainly can like talk all day and bring up some other stuff. But yeah, this would be a great time for your question.
That was wonderful, wonderful. I think what makes you one of, I think the most valuable and precious talents in our industry is that journey that you went through from the very first experience of anxiety for the shot that you worked on for 2 weeks to go through and start animating, going through around the world, learning new things. I think you speak French fluently now as well, sort of. And then like going up this ladder step by step. So while everyone's getting ready for asking their question or sending your your work, if you want a feedback from Kyle, I'm asking a very question that I'm thinking about it a lot of time, is that like, because many of us like you get into the industry to tell stories. We have ideas, we have thoughts, but we get lost in the technicality and in the cogs and gears of the industry, and we can't elevate into to a point that we would be able to tell stories, what we the very first motivation that we got into it. So how we can like tackle this thing? Do you suggest?
I think the most important thing is, especially since like, I'm going to turn me down just because I have a little feedback, is that, you're filmmakers right now. You may go from school and be an animator at a studio for a while where you're helping somebody else like realize their vision for the film. If you're in school right now making your own film, this is such a valuable time for you because you are developing your point of view. And people were telling me that all the time when I was in school, and I didn't quite know what they meant. I'm just like, I actually needed to pay for my school. I need to get a job, and if I could just get an animation job, I would already be over the moon, because that would be, for me, it was so much more than what I could have expected coming from, that town in the desert that I grew up in. And so what they were telling me, and they had years of experience in the industry, is, like, make your film for you. And I think that all ended up making much more sense, because if you're making your films for you, if you're making the whatever animation exercises or tests you're doing, you're trying to get across what very special way you see the world is in this little slice of film that you've made. And that's going to communicate to people who you are and what you're going to bring. So even if it's like in the beginning that you're going to be working on somebody else's film, when I watch a student demo reel, I'm not looking at like, are the textures great? Are the is the rendering perfect? Is everything perfect? Is the sound design perfect? Is all that kind of stuff? It can be very, very rough. It could be hardware rendered. It could be pencil line drawings without color. But with as rough as it is, if it moves me and it makes me feel like for a second I stop watching animation and I'm watching a character that I can start to have empathy with, that I care about what they want, I'm interested in what they want, what they're trying to do, you've done something amazing, and it's not because you did the perfect IK setup in your rig. It's not because of any of those things. It's because you saw something in your head, you created it, even a rough version of it that had like heart and charm and humor, or maybe it was scary or whatever it is, but it evoked emotion in me. Then if I watch it and go like, okay, but the weight was off. It didn't have a perfect arc. The animation wasn't as smooth as it could have been. Even when I was like an animation supervisor, I'd be like, I can work with them on that. That stuff you can learn that. What is harder to learn is a point of view. When you're working on somebody else's films, you probably will get cast. Like they'll identify you very quickly as being like really great with acting, really great with physicality. In some cases, both. You can do anything, and that's incredible if you can. And then I think the best way that animation supervisors will cast you is to your strengths. They want you to succeed. And you have to communicate back. I tell them what you want. Maybe I can't give you the shot that you want right now. Maybe you're not ready for it. But I'll work with you to try to get there if you're not ready for it now. But it's really good to know what your point of view is, what you want to do. That ultimately, if you want to go into directing, that's really what you're going to be pitching, is your point of view, whether it's for your own film project or whether somebody gives you a script that says like, how would you do this, and you make a pitch deck that shows like what unique way you would how you would tell that story, what angle, what are the themes, what are the values that you really connected with, that you think other people are going to connect with too, that are going to want to go see it and it's going to move them. Because if we're talking about films that are, not independent films, studio films, they must be very relatable, like rather than experimental. That's the world that I come from. Not that there's not a place for highly experimental film and things like that. There definitely is, but the kinds of work that I've done is that's aimed at connecting with like the most amount of people as possible who are gonna have fun, really to like bring joy and laughter to people is what the big goal of these movies were. So I think that there's so many ways you can go in your career and so many different like points of view you can have. Finding what is yours, I think, is the real key thing to do while you're learning techniques. You're learning the methodology, you're learning the principles of animation, principles of cinematography, etc.
Yeah, that was a very great point. I loved when you talked about being moved by we had few students of us getting awards like just last week from New Zealand Best Design Award, and those projects who were selected and like were the ones who were able to move the audience. Like the movies you made, like let's go like to Minion, for example. It's absolutely fun to watch, but like the scenes that I remember, like the moment that the guy is talking to the little orphans and just playing with the like those little finger characters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I cried for that scene. So like it was for me. I'm a father too, and it was just so relatable. So we have so enough of me talking. So we have 23 people online and about more than 40 people. I'm sure there's plenty of other questions. So guys, as usual, I hand this microphone to you. If you have any questions, just raise your hand. And online people also, we have Miriam, my colleague, online as well. So if you have question, open your mic or type your question. So let's start from here. Ian has a question here.
Hi, Kyle.
Hi.
So you worked on like a lot of cult classics, basically, like in my opinion, at least. How does it feel to like look back on them and be like, wow, I worked on that? Especially because you were quite young, like quite early on in your journey than when you were working on things like Jumanji. So,
I mean, I feel really mostly gratitude for the being at the place that I was, like coming out of school at a time when so much was happening and booming in the industry. It's funny because I guess I don't feel as old as I am, because often I'll meet people and then they'll tell me that they saw The Mask when they were a kid, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess I'm a bit older than you. Because for me, it just happened, you know, it's just right behind me. It all happened so quickly. But no, it's mostly gratitude to have been a part of that and to have learned so much in those processes.
Beautiful. Anyone else? Oh, there's a question. Yeah, and there's a question online.
Hello.
Hi.
I just have a quick question. What do you think is the hardest lesson you learned in the industry?
The hardest lesson I learned is to make people, it's thematic even when I was an animator and even more so as a director, that we are in the craft and art of making people feel something, making people feel empathy. You know, so if you're in animation, you think about physicality and acting as being like the two main things. I think of physicality really as like the grammar of a language. It's like weight, how the body moves, how joints rotate, things like that. It's really important because if the weight doesn't look right, the audience is going to be watching it and thinking that something feels off or weird. The lip sync is off, that's physicality. And they don't believe it, you know, so they don't have empathy. But acting is showing a character think and feel and solve problems and have an agency and, you know, all the really important things that we deal with every day. That's like the expression, right? So if you think about the way you speak a language, you have to know the grammar, the physicality, the principles of animation. But what you do with it is the expression. So being a great writer isn't just about spelling the words correctly and knowing the grammar properly. It's about, once again, moving people, you know. As a director, it's the same thing. You're trying to create rooting interest in the audience for the characters that you put up on screen. You want them to care about what happens to them. You want them to you know, want what they want, understand why they want it, be rooting for them or rooting against them. Either way, as long as there's that conflict. If the audience is in the movie theater and they don't care, then for me, that's the worst thing. So everything that I try to do now kind of all comes back to that. Like, how can I cultivate emotion and empathy for the audience and these characters?
Hi there. I was just wondering what your opinion is on when you're in school. Do you think it's better if you kind of learn as much as possible in a wide range, or would it be better to specialize to a certain field?
That's a really good question. I guess I can only say what worked for me, which was that I was lucky in the beginning that I only wanted to be an animator in the beginning. And so it was very, very specialized. And it was just curiosity that made me jump to layout, jump to storyboarding, and then opportunities that came that like allowed me to do those works. But I would say if the curiosity hadn't been there, I might not have like cultivated with as much passion what those particular métiers are all about, those different aspects of it are. So I'm a very like old school Joseph Campbell person of like follow your bliss, follow what really like excites you about something. Because if you spend your time learning something that you're doing it just for practical reasons, but you don't really connect with it, you don't really like it, you might get the job, but will you be happy doing it? You know, so I think it's tough because we're always trying to balance the practicality of living and, you know, paying the bills that we have to do and those sorts of things. But I would say that especially when you're younger and you have so much time to make mistakes and to try things out, you know, I would lean more towards the less conservative side of going for it and doing the things that really excite you and taking chances that way, and then adding as you go.
Thank you.
B online has a question. B, feel free to open your camera and mic and ask your question. And who goes next? Just raise your hand and I'll pass.
Hello. Hello. I'm the one online. I wanted to ask you, how over the years have you seen the industry change? Basically, like workplace themes that you've seen, and where do you think that it's going?
That's really good. Well, I spent most of my career watching the industry change in the sense of the kinds of stories that you could tell. You know, like when Jurassic Park came out, that changed the game. When Toy Story came out, then everyone is like, how do we get a pipeline together and the talent together to make a fully animated film? But then, you know, it's like Jurassic Park didn't have hair and fur and fire and water. Then those things came later. You know, then you could do like hair on fire or hair that's wet, and then you could start merging all those things. You know, when Lord of the Rings was made, it's like finally you could do like massive crowd scenes, and they called the tool massive as a result. You know, so it's like all those things kind of paved the way to like opening things up. Now it feels like you could do anything. You could tell any kind of story. The technology is no longer limiting. So I think that what that means is you also can't dazzle somebody with special effects and get by just on that. You know, people are so used to seeing such amazing level of animation and special effects that the story comes back to being the thing that needs to be really good. The characters need to be really strong and good. You have to care about them. So I think that in a way we've kind of come back full circle to like what storytelling is all about, which is fantastic, with less limitations about how to do things. The work environments had been pretty similar, you know, until the pandemic happened, and now we're like in this kind of amorphous, like most people want to stay at home. You know, like what can you do at home, really? I loved it for a while, and now I just want to be with people. I prefer live meetings than Zoom meetings. Because the quality of what happens in the room is just different, you know. So much of what we would do, well, I mentioned earlier that I played Dungeons and Dragons, you know, when I was a kid. I still play it as an adult. And one of the best times I have is getting around the table with my friends and, you know, dressing up really crazy and, you know, drinking a bottle of wine and basically like doing this big improvised story for 4 or 5 hours. And what I started to realize is that when I'm in a story meeting with my writer and producer and editor, it's not very different than that. You know, it's like improv theater where you have this like yes and type of mentality. Somebody throws an idea out, you don't just like cut it down, even if it doesn't sound great. You play with it and you like toss it around, and before you know it, it becomes something. And that can happen on a Zoom call for sure. But I find that it just misses a little bit of the warmth and connection. So I'm old school, love working, you know, with people, at least for the important things. Then if people want to go home and, you know, storyboard on their own, you know, most of our story team, even pre-COVID, lived outside of Paris, and I would just like already do like Skype calls with them back in the day, and that sort of thing. But it's because that's the best you could do. They're not going to be able to fly to your city. Where it's going is really hard to know at this point. You know, I think it's especially like kind of growing up in this era where you can be remote. But you know, you also hear a lot of people saying that they feel isolated or alone all the time, you know, and like, how do you have that connection? So I think we have a lot to kind of, like, as a global society, kind of work out on how this new technology that we're using, how much of it is good for our souls as humans, how much of it feels human.
Thanks for your great question, B.
Thank you.
We have a question here by Michael.
Hi. Do you have any suggestions for wanting to get into layouts and framing as a department, like where you would aim for as an entry-level job, and what skills would be relevant for it?
Sure. Well, a question back to you, just so I can understand like the environment in your school. Do you work on individual projects or do you work on group projects?
At the moment, individual, but have done some
Okay.
group ones.
Okay. So in an individual project, you could favor stories that that are highly cinematic. And you might even go so far, depending, again, I'm throwing out ideas, not knowing what the demands of your curriculum are, but doing even like previs, like taking it to that level, not taking it to finished animation, taking it to a level where your project is to show like amazing visual storytelling, doing exercises like that. If you're working on a group project, or maybe if you have to complete the animation, maybe choosing a theme that, a style of animation that isn't going to require like, you know, massive amounts of like very fluid keyframes and really time consuming, you know, beautiful crafting of the performance. That can be something more stylized, more like pose driven, you know, where you're able to let the camera and the staging do most of the heavy lifting. If you're working on a group project, then being the head of layout on that project, if that's a possibility, is really great, because then you have everyone else like making it like beautiful lighting and beautiful animation, and you're doing the beautiful visual storytelling that can stand out in that sense. Aside from those two options, I would say anywhere you can just be practicing the art of visual storytelling, like just previs stuff. You could storyboard things if you are more comfortable drawing. From the, you know, there's two different kinds of storyboards. You have shooting boards, and then you have like animation storyboards. And in live action, a lot of the storyboard people are actually working with the director of photography or before the director of photography to sort of visualize what the camera angles are going to be. An feature animation storyboard artist knows enough about cinematography to make the shots not confusing, and maybe they do have a point of view, which you could even use later, and that's gravy, that's extra. But what they're really doing is trying to come up with gag ideas, story ideas, what's the business that the character can do. Like you read it on the script, and on the script it's two characters talking. An animation that gets boring to watch really fast. What can they be doing while they're talking? The storyboard artist can help you come up with some ideas for that. And again, they're leaning on cinematography and staging to do so, but that's still going to go to the layout artist for them to envision, you know, put the camera where they think is best. But yeah, I think those are the best things. Other things you can do too, just by the way, is take films that you like a lot, that are inspiring to you from a cinematography point of view, and reverse engineer them. Do it on paper, like draw like a diagram of the set from above. You know, you got your camera, wherever it's pointing, this is from the top view, and put the characters where you think they are, and shot by shot, like think about what they did. And you'll start to see like they totally broke the rules right there. They're not even in the same location, you know, and they made those breaking of the rules work because it was seamless on screen. That's been one of the best ways I've learned, is by looking at stuff that I like, turning off the sound so you're not getting hooked on it. It's easier sometimes to watch stuff that doesn't work because you can't get into it. So instead you can just sit and criticize. I can't believe they put that close up there. It totally breaks the flow, or the eye trace is all wrong, whatever. But when you watch something that's really good, you have to find ways to like turning the sound down, or even like flipping it completely, like 180 degrees, the screen, so that you can see it in a different way. But there's a lot to be learned from doing that way as well.
Cool, thank you.
Sure.
A lot of practical hints. Amazing. We have a question here.
Hi, what advice would you have for the very first week of the very first job?
I would say don't be afraid to ask questions. You know, like I think that there's a fear of like it's going to make you look like you don't know what you're doing, and make them feel insecure for something that they hired you. But I actually think that you know, when someone's asking a lot of questions or thinking about the process, you're constantly like looking for ways to, you know, add value to the studio, to the project. If I know someone's there because they really want to like make the film better, you know, I can be pretty patient to hear their ideas, even if there's not a way to integrate them. There not always is. But you also have to read the room a little bit because a lot can be happening. So there's always going to be the time where it's like time and place for posing those questions or proposing those ideas. Maybe it's a little bit more with like the colleagues around you, if you're an animator, the animator sitting next to you. Share what you know, also be generous in that sense. I remember one studio that I got to in the beginning, people were really like holding on to what they knew in like a competitive way, like little tricks that they knew about how to do something, even if it's just methodology. And I just find that you have to like not worry about you're not going to lose it. You know, you're sharing, you're all there to like make the same thing and make it as good as possible. So I just think having that kind of attitude it can make a big difference. And take care of yourself. You know, like it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Like don't get sick because you never leave the studio and or never stop working, and then you know then you're not at your best when you need to be. So don't forget to do that too.
Awesome. We are very mindful of your precious time as well. Unfortunately, I think we might not have time for feedback, but we have time for a few more questions. If you have any, there's one question online. Nana asks, how do you think AI would influence your workflow as a director, and how it would help or hinder your colleagues in different departments in future? Very good question, Nana.
Yeah, the AI question is very popular, understandably these days. So I think like I'm always careful in the way that I ask because it's like a snapshot in time and it's changing so rapidly that you know the answer that I might give to this in 6 months from now can be completely different. But what I would say now is that it's certainly here to stay. And, you know, I think that finding ways to work with it rather than against it, or maybe even not think of it so much as like replacing you, but how can it like help you cultivate yourself as an artist? So, so this one story that I like is an old story about like old chess masters when AI really first came on the scene, and the chess masters started to lose chess games to AI. And once that happened, then a lot of fear came about, like, oh no, like these computers are better than humans. And then they tried some experiments where a chess master plus an AI against another human chess master, and this combination was very, very strong. And it might be called either a centaur or a chimera or something. I can't remember the name. It's like a mythological fusion of like two creatures. And I think this can be very strong. But I would say that where AI is right now, the thing that I take, I think of it as like a big thesaurus. You know what I mean? Like I can ask ChatGPT questions about history and facts and all kinds of stuff. And you know, if I need to know what something's called and I'm describing it in a weird way that Google would never give me an answer for, like ChatGPT can kind of extrapolate what I'm trying to say. That will help me in my writing. You know what I mean? But I'm not letting it like write for me. I'm just like getting it like as a sounding board to try to like get references, or where has this been done, or what's the structure of this other thing that's happened, how is this similar, you know, looking for originality. What it's really great at doing, both visually and in terms of audio text, sorry, is taking like a survey of everything that's been done and then like replicating it, you know. So as a human being, if you have that true unique point of view, then you're not doing something derivative of something that's already been seen before. If you ask ChatGPT to write a script right now, it's going to write a script that's based off of like all the other scripts it could read in that moment. And that's where you're getting stuff that's very cliche, doesn't really work, doesn't have like a lot of heart. So it's going to force you as an artist to be even more original and more independent. And I would say that people who don't have that kind of training, don't have a creative point of view on things, and are just like plugging in prompts, whatever they can create out of it is never going to be as interesting as somebody who does have a point of view and is using it almost like as a personal assistant more than anything else. That's my point of view about AI today on October 9th. So we'll see how things evolve here.
Great answer. Any question in the studio before we? Okay, so we have Barbara. You have a question. Feel free to open your camera and ask the question.
Hi, Kyle. Sorry, no camera, but I do have a microphone.
It's okay.
Hopefully it works. Thank you for your talk. That was really cool to hear and really cool advice. And you mentioned early on that you had this wanderlust and kind of a love for traveling that led to the next steps in your career and taking the risks to move somewhere else to try a new project. And speaking of that, does a career in animation require you to have this take risk, travel somewhere else attitude?
I don't think it requires it. I mean, I think to some degree you have to go where the work is. But there is work all over the place. There's lots of work, as far as I understand, in New Zealand. So, you know, I think it would seem to me that that you have lots of like choice and opportunities there. But sometimes it happens where, you know, there's not a project where you live, where you want to be, and then you might have to get up and leave. But this is maybe where I think B's earlier question about how things are progressing. I do know that some people are animating on projects from other countries. Mostly what stands in your way with that is whatever security issues the studio has and what they've done to safeguard themselves, where working outside of the studio is not going to be something they have to worry about with their, you know, their intellectual property, and that could be like the models or the rigs or, you know, the connection to the pipeline or anything like that could get out there in the open. But barring that, you know, I do know a lot of people work remotely to, like, you know, the degree of like being in pretty different time zones.
Right, and last question. Thanks, Barbara. Miriam, do you want to open your mic or camera to ask the question, or do you want me to read it?
Okay, sure, thank you. I'm Hossein's colleague, Miriam, and have really enjoyed your talk. Thank you. I'm just wondering whether you have any plans to write and direct your own work, and wondering if it might even be in Europe, because it seems Europe has been more supportive of independent feature-length animation, and I'm just thinking of the, you know, really strong animations like Flea, I Lost My Body, which was French, The Illusionist, and so on.
Yeah, that's a great question, and more definitely a goal and interest for me. I've been, you know, quietly cultivating several of my own personal projects, while also putting together pitch decks and things like that on scripts that come my way. So for me, this is, you know, in terms of like thinking about the growing edge, that's absolutely where it's at for me, and what's pulling me. Having said that, I still really love like reading a really great script that's, you know, been brought to a certain point, finding my way with it, finding like how would I tell this story, you know, like what kind of casting, what kind of locations, point of view, lighting, production design, all those things, and collaborating with a writer to, you know, shape it from there into, you know, something that'll be on screen. Different challenge, but also extremely satisfying.
Fantastic. Let's have a. Oh, you have one second. That would be the last. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to ask really quickly. What was the longest campaign that you've played for D&D?
Curse of Strahd.
Oh.
I am currently DMing Curse of Strahd.
Oh, excellent. Okay, well, no spoilers. Yeah, it's we play a group of us. My wife and I started, just her and I, because yeah, it was like just DMing her playing it. Took her through the whole thing, and then we got a friend group together of colleagues and friends. Started playing like once every three weeks for about a year. And unfortunately, we still have yet to finish it, but it's been a while, so everyone's moved. Hard to get everyone back together. So
nice. Can I have everybody's great applause for our amazing guest?
Thank you.
Fantastic talk, fantastic. And if you can hold for a few more seconds, I can ask everybody to come here and take a selfie with Kyle as a celebrity for our industry. Come here, come here, come here, come. Somebody who's tall, you hold it like this. Yeah, you hold it so Kyle sees us. You will be in the frame. Don't worry. And no, look at me. Like hold it like. No, come here, everybody. Come inside. Come inside. Can you see us, Kyle?
Yeah, I can see you.
Yes, come inside. Yay! Fit in as much as you can. I can stand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, yeah! Everyone go crazy! Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Please send that to me. I'd love to have that.
Yeah, really appreciate that. Really appreciate it. Have a great
Thank you
rest.
so much. All right.
And
Bye.
see you soon. We should go hiking. Yeah, see you soon. Take care.
All right.